Now, NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio with Lee Witting, whether you're listening on TalkZone, by podcast, through the archives of our ad-free shows on our YouTube channel, or connected through the incredible content of our Facebook page. With all eyes these days looking toward the possibility of a multinational war over Israel, I thought I'd give you an update on the shocking deathbed prophecy of a famous rabbi reported on this show some 10 years ago. But first, let me say, if you've listened to this show for any length of time, you understand that we do not proclaim a point of view tied to any particular religion or denomination. As a chaplain, I worked in a non-denominational hospital with people of many faiths or no faith at all. It was not my job to preach, but to listen and learn and support people where they were in their own spiritual journey. Likewise, NDE Radio does not affiliate with any particular religious or anti-religious point of view, because if we've learned anything from the near-death experience, it's that NDEs are universal across all faiths and non-faiths. What happens to us when we die happens. There are a variety of near-death experiences reported by those who cross over for a visit, and they range from positive and beautiful to sometimes dark and scary. But what we see does not seem directly connected to the religion we do or do not belong to during our lives on earth. Of course, this can be upsetting to practitioners of those religions that claim to be the only way to heaven, the only truth. But if our experiences at death are any indication, then the exclusive religions we belonged to on earth are not so exclusive after all. The reaction of religious faiths to the reality of the NDEs of their members is sometimes quite bizarre. For instance, some fundamental Protestant groups love hearing about distressing NDEs because they see it as proof there is a hell for non-believers. Personally, I'm wary of religions who are happier to find proof of hell than they are proof of heaven. If a religion retains its membership by promoting fear of God's judgment over faith in God's love, then, to my way of thinking, they have their priorities screwed up. But that's just it. That's to my way of thinking, not theirs. And each has a right to their opinion, their explanation of what life and death are all about. But what if a powerful religious leader suddenly delivers a message that's at odds with his or her own traditions? On that NDE radio show from 10 years ago, I spoke about the radical changes the then new Pope Francis was introducing to the Catholic Church, and compared it to the prophecy of a renowned rabbi recently deceased who had predicted the imminent coming of the Jewish Messiah. So more specifically, here's what I said back in 2014. Let's take a look at what's happening in the Catholic Church today, with the homilies and declarations of the new Pope Francis. Some traditionally conservative Catholics are declaring him an anti-pope because of his approach to the universality of God's love. Pope Francis has declared, for instance, that Jesus did not die on the cross just for Catholics or even for Christians. He has been teaching that even atheists, if they live their lives with love and kindness, will be with him on the other side. Yes, that's radical, but consider how Pope Francis' approach is already revitalizing the Catholic Church. I've met many former Catholics who are thinking of returning to the fold on account of what Pope Francis has to say. But I bring this up not because of Pope Francis, but because of Ariel Sharon, the Israeli leader who has been in a coma for 8 years. The news is he is now experiencing organ failure, and soon he will be dead. Questions abound. For me, they revolve around why would anyone be sustained in a coma for such a long time? 1. And 2, can you imagine what out-of-body and NDE experiences Mr. Sharon has been undergoing during the last 8 years? But there's an even bigger question than that surrounding his impending death, and it has to do with the visions of a famous rabbi named Yitzhak Kaduri. Rabbi Kaduri died on January 28, 2006, at the reported age of 108. His death came at the time, about the same time as Ariel Sharon suffered the start of his coma. As a young man, Rabbi Kaduri had been blessed by another well-respected rabbi, and that man prophesied that Rabbi Kaduri would meet the Jewish Messiah before the end of his life. Now, this was no small thing. For millennia, the Hebrew people have prophesied about and looked forward to the coming of a Savior. When Jesus came, some thought it would be him, but he didn't really fulfill their expectations of a king who would save them from the enemies on earth and establish a virtual heaven on earth in Israel. The Jews that did accept him as Messiah became known as Christians, and by combining the teachings of Jesus with the theology of St. Paul, they formed a religion that ultimately embraced Gentiles, foreigners, the uncircumcised, a very inclusive group. Moreover, today there are so-called Messianic Jews who keep the synagogue form of worship while embracing Yeshua as their Messiah. The long and short is that the Jewish people who still believe in the notion of a coming Messiah at all are still waiting for the coming of their true Messiah. Likewise, some Muslims anticipate a coming Messiah of their own. But given the history of their persecution by Christians, it's no wonder that for many Jews, the name of Jesus has become more a curse than a blessing to their people. So needless to say, Rabbi Kaduri's followers were greatly excited when he announced a few months before he died that he had had a vision of the Messiah and that he would reveal his name to the Jewish people. The magazine Israel Today reported in their April 2007 edition that the rabbi's son, David Kaduri, confirmed that, quote, in his last year, his father talked and dreamed almost exclusively about the Messiah and his coming. My father has met the Messiah in a vision, he said, and told us that he would come soon. The article goes on, a few months before Kaduri died at the age of 108, he surprised his followers when he told them that he had met the Messiah. Kaduri gave a message in his synagogue on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, teaching how to recognize the Messiah. He also mentioned that the Messiah would appear to Israel after Ariel Sharon's death. Other rabbis predicted the same, including Rabbi Chaim Cohen, Kabbalist Nir ben Arzi, and the wife of Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. Rabbi Kaduri was especially gifted. He was known for his brilliant mind, his photographic memory, his memorization of the Bible, the Talmud, and many other Jewish writings. During his long life, he knew many Jewish sages and mystics. Israel Today described him as, quote, charismatic and wise, and chief rabbis looked up to him as a tzaddik, a righteous man or saint. When he died, close to 300,000 people joined the funeral procession through the streets of Jerusalem. But now comes the hard part of the story, the part where religious differences spark many of the ugly divisions the world has witnessed. Rabbi Kaduri had promised to reveal the name of the Messiah in a note to be opened a year after his death. And when the note was opened, the note indicated the name of the Messiah was Yehoshua, or Yeshua, the Hebrew name for Jesus. Needless to say, his Jewish followers were very upset. Some declared the note a forgery, and most rejected it out of hand. Never mind that the name is really just another version of Joshua, a common name that could have made the whole thing just a coincidence. Even a hint that the Jewish Messiah might turn out to be the Christian Messiah, and perhaps even the Islamic Messiah as well, was too much information for most, and the whole business was quietly put aside. The press in Israel spent remarkably little time on it. Now, as listeners to NDE Radio know, many NDEers, Christians and non-Christians alike, have reported meeting Jesus. In a story told by one Orthodox Jew who had an NDE, he said, "Jesus hugged me." And when I asked him how he knew it was Jesus, he replied, "I just knew." A good friend of mine who was not particularly religious and never had an NDE told me about his miraculous visions of Mary and Jesus before he died a few years back. Literally thousands of people of all faiths have had NDEs and other spiritually transformative experiences in which they met a being they identified as Jesus. So Rabbi Kaduri's experience was by no means unique, and yet because of his honored position in the Jewish tradition, his vision of the Messiah has resulted in remarkably little discussion in Israel itself. It's much like the Vatican's reaction to Pope Francis' suggestion that atheists might go to heaven. For the most part, a stunned silence is the most telling reaction. In that show from 2014, I continued, Ariel Sharon is now dying, and Rabbi Kaduri's prophecy is about to be proven false or true. Those of us who have experienced NDEs know that some of the prized beliefs of many religions only serve to separate us from each other, but in the end we will all be brought to a full recognition of the truth, and that is because when we die, we live to see the hereafter as it really is. Meanwhile, maybe Yeshua's appearance will be triggered by today's rising tensions over Israel. How many ways can you spell Armageddon? I'm going to finish today's show with an NDE from the files of IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. One of the benefits of being a member of IANDS are the NDE reports they send to members each month. I chose this report because the experiencer just knew, without being told their names, that she was dealing with Angel Gabriel and Archangel Michael. This experiencer, named Jennifer Bryant, writes, I was at a point where I realized my life was not in a good place. I was fed up and angry at myself for making unbeneficial choices. Driving to work one morning while feeling this intense anger, I said to myself, I'm not going to live this way anymore. Disgust welled up inside me, and out of the blue, I burst into prayer. A passion came from deep within me as words flew out of my mouth, demanding change. I prayed aloud, fiercely saying, God, you get down here now and fix my life, or take me home. I have screwed it up and I can't fix it. I'm done. I didn't ask God to fix my life. I told him how to fix it. Little did I know how quickly the divine would respond. I arrived at work and routinely continued with my day. I had even forgotten all about my morning hissy fit prayer. Around lunchtime, I decided to go to the bank. Driving there, not 3 hours after my passionate prayer, a vision began to unfold like a movie in my mind's eye. It all happened so fast. I saw a white car coming toward me and hit me head on. I thought, what a strange vision. And just as the vision faded away, I looked ahead and actually saw a white car coming toward me. It crossed the yellow line. I knew it was going to hit me head on. In a second's time, I recalled thinking three things simultaneously. Oh, no, this isn't what I meant. Shit, this is going to hurt. And, well, I guess my prayer's been answered. In that moment, I was positive Source Creator chose to take my life rather than fix it. Then I panicked and thought, no, I can't leave my son behind. My son was the only thing I wanted to live for. Yet at the same time, I knew whatever was happening was sealed. I was then drawn to look upward to my left. I saw a huge, brilliant light being descending toward me at hyper speed. I knew this being was Archangel Michael. Michael's energy force pulled me out of my body and my car. Floating in a vortex of cloud-like, dark, silent space, I could only see a trail of light emanating from Michael's path ahead of me. I was magnetically connected to it. I glided gently upward behind Michael, having no movement or control of my own. I then heard the cars crash behind me. I instantly realized Michael had taken me out of my body long before the crash even took place. I knew the body I left behind, felt the impact of the hit, but I felt nothing but perfection. When I began to turn my head to look at the crash scene, Michael halted me and kept my gaze on him instead. I felt I didn't need to see the crash. At that moment, I realized I was no longer alive on Earth. I felt a heaviness move through me when I realized I'd left my son behind. I thought, no, I can't die. I can't leave him. Michael then reminded me of the day my son had been electrocuted and that he is always watched over. Understanding that Michael was one of the 3 angels that had visited my son, I thought, okay then, I'm ready to go. I looked forward into Michael's trail of light with awe and was bathed in the illumination. As we went higher, a whitish haze began to appear all around me. It was so silent, peaceful, pure, and complete. There was no emotion, thought, or separation. Telepathic knowing took the place of spoken language, and I was unified with everything, everywhere, completely immersed in love. As I gazed at Michael ahead of me, the light trail began to expand, and I merged deeper into it. Then I began to hear a faint, angelic, divine sound. It wasn't music, yet it was the most magical symphony of immaculate sound. I remembered knowing that sound. Then the white haze became thicker, and we picked up speed. As we began to lean toward the light, I saw a piercing, brilliant white light beginning to engulf everything. The bright light exploded as we entered it. I was then standing inside a whitish space in front of an entryway. Archangel Michael was to my left, and Archangel Gabriel was to my right. Neither, by the way, were human-like, nor were they male or female. They were just illuminated beings, both masculine and feminine. I knew them well, and they knew me perfectly. I sensed this was not the first time we'd been together. Michael and Gabriel knew everything about my being, as evidenced when we then exchanged telepathic conversation. While I don't recall what the angels said to me, I do recall what I said to them. They must have told me I would be going back to Earth, because I remember my adamant disagreements stating, you can't do that. You can't bring people here and then send them back to that. It's just not right. Then they both spoke something to me, and whatever they said led me to look ahead into the entryway. The entry was dark. As I slightly recalled humans being afraid of the dark, I thought, that's pretty dark in there, and questioned if they were going to send me in there. I curiously peered into the void of nothingness, and then I and the entire space felt something compelling coming forth. I began to feel the space itself morphing into something. It sounded and moved like gentle water approaching. Then the waves began to shape into an illuminated, fluid being. And as the being approached the entryway where I stood, and everything became silent, glowing, and awe-filled. I knew this being was all perfection, Creator, God, the Holy Spirit, the Father, source of all things ever created, and it held the existence of all beings and things within its existence. I then understood why its entryway looked dark. The light inside was so bright and blinding it appeared black, just like when we look at the sun and everything turns black afterward. My human-defined perception of darkness was erased from me. I recalled I had been with Creator before and knew of its ever-changing omnipresence and how Creator manifests its existence in endless ways. At that point, I was directed to refer to this being appropriately as the nameless source and not by the name God, and I understood why. The word and entity God was manufactured by humankind after Creator and creation and manifests separateness from Creator, source of all. I was overcome with its indescribable awe, opened my arms wide, kneeled, and bowed before Creator in pure, unadulterated honor. Then Source sent through me what I can only describe as a loving smile and spoke, "Oh, stand, all are equal." And simultaneously, Source lifted me up into an upright standing position directly facing its presence. I say it instead of he or she because I knew referring to Source as a human, male, female, or a name degrades and adulterates Creator's awe and divine perfection. My communication with Source, Michael, and Gabriel was what we define as telepathic, but that doesn't even describe the all-encompassing knowing to the fullest. While communication with Michael and Gabriel felt more physical, the communication with Creator was a more easily accessible divine language. My whole being was one with Creator's language, and my soul knew and understood everything. I recalled Creator, this indescribable, magnificent being, had dealt with me before at this very entryway, and yet in a very different way. I knew everything and also nothing at the same time. I, of course, was no longer feisty. Now I expressed my desire to stay in the afterlife in sacred awe as love, which there are no words or definitions to describe. Upon my request to stay with him, Source's fluid presence began to move closer toward me. As it did, slow motion took hold, and I began to sense a water's wave of a spinning motion encircling me. There was a deafening silence, yet I could hear the heavenly music echoing everywhere and within me. Source then spoke through me and filled me up with what I could only call the mystery of wisdom. Source stretched out what could only be described in human terms as illuminated arms. And in a timeless moment of being bathed in love, I thought, oh good, Creator is going to hug me and let me stay. I watched in awe as Creator's illuminated waters reached toward my chest. Then a brilliant, blinding flash of light exploded, and I flung backward, stretching out my arms, saying, no. I was then being enveloped in a white, hazy cloud. At first, I thought Creator sent me to another place in the afterlife, because I still felt I was a spirit body. I then realized I was sitting inside my vehicle, and the white haze was simply the contents of my car's airbag. Still not believing Source sent me back, I began to question whether I was alive or dead. I felt like I was dead, or at least in spirit, and still floating in heaven. I thought maybe Creator sent me back as a spirit guide, and that I was just invisibly hovering in the car. I could still feel Archangel Michael nearby, helping me ground and understand, so I just waited. Then when a friend stopped to help me get out of my car, I knew I was back in my body. I sat there for a few moments, just shaking my head, completely stunned they had sent me back. But I felt so perfect and couldn't give up thought to anything less than that. Michael then sent his wisdom through me, confirming that we four were synchronized. I knew right then neither I nor my life would ever be the same. And it wasn't. It didn't stop there. I was compelled to experience many things out of the norm, to follow the guidance of the invisible world, and as the days and years progressed, to see the emergence of my soul self and my sacred relationship with the infinite divine presence. As time passed, I began to recognize an endless trail of mysterious changes to my intelligence, extrasensory abilities, and overall personality. Everything I was and did in my prior life changed. I was held in the grips of spirit, transforming everything about me and my life, but it was easily received because I felt like a pure, innocent 5-year-old child seeing life with untainted eyes. I had not a care in the world. I saw nothing as wrong, broken, or damaged, and that everything had a divine lining. Comically, this state earned me the nickname Glossy. I had a knack for understanding the divine language in everything. I've spent the past 19 years communicating divine linguistics, prophetic messages, and understandings of the origins beyond, which compelled me to write 9 books on self-empowerment, self-help, and spiritual ascension. Having the near-death, out-of-body, otherworldly experiences continues. I was led to write my book, Life Beyond Us, and I am currently starting a second book with more, including my 3 most recent NDEs. That's how much awe, love, and magic spirit wants us to receive. Ha ha. Creator did take me home and fixed my life. Not only am I beyond grateful my sassy prayer was answered, I enjoy the loving reminder of my precious divine reunion with Creator, Michael and Gabriel every day. By a scar imprinted on my forearm, it is in the shape of Archangel Michael, flying upward, bringing me into the light, exactly as I experienced. And here her report ends. By the way, Jennifer Bryant can be contacted at jbother@proton.me. That's proton, proton.me, where you may also order her book, Life Beyond Us. Well, my thanks to Jennifer Bryant and IANDS for her story. Be sure to look for her book, Life Beyond Us, and try to make it to the IANDS annual conference being held in Phoenix, Arizona at the end of this month of August. And thanks to you for listening. If you'd like to hear this show again or any of our more than 500 archived, ad-free NDE interviews, go to TalkZone's NDE Radio site and hit the Past Shows button, or go to our YouTube channel, NDE Radio with Lee Witting, where you can subscribe to and comment on the complete NDE Radio library. And be sure to check out our NDE Radio Facebook page. Just search NDE Radio with Lee Witting on your Facebook app. And listen next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern at TalkZone for more NDE Radio. I'm your host, Lee Witting, saying, once again, thanks for listening.